Good morning. Did I wake you up? Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worthiness and dignity of every person, and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Shar Priolo. I'm a longtime member of the Meetinghouse. I'm a member of the worship committee, and I sing in the choir. Today, I'm serving as your worship host. Welcome to those in the room, and welcome also to those of you watching on our live stream. This morning, we welcome to our pulpit David Mills. David Mills is a longtime member of the UU Meetinghouse of Provincetown and is a retired judge. He grew up in Danvers and went to Boston College undergraduate and law school before embarking on a 54-year career in the law. David has served as Middlesex County Assistant District Attorney, Massachusetts Assistant Attorney General, Danvers Town Moderator, and as State Ethics Commissioner. Slacker. He currently serves on the Governor's Judicial Nominating Committee, which means he's reviewing the applications of Massachusetts attorneys to be of service as judges. David, thank you for your incredible service to our state, and thank you so much for sharing your message with us this morning. Before we go on with our service, I have just a few announcements to share. Today, December 1, marks World AIDS Day. In honor of this, the AIDS support group will be holding their annual vigil at 4:30 this afternoon. This will take place at the Provincetown AIDS Memorial in the side yard of Town Hall. After a brief ceremony of remembrance and candlelighting, there will be a reception at the Great Room at 96 Bradford Street, where multiple Provincetown AIDS Memorial quilts will be on display. We hope that you can attend this very meaningful vigil. Our UU Meetinghouse annual meeting will take place next Sunday afternoon. If you're a member, you should have received the annual meeting packet in your mailboxes this week. This meeting will be on Zoom at 2 o'clock. We'll send the Zoom link out to our UUMH folk email list. There will also be a pre-meeting on Saturday morning, the 7th, at 11 a.m. for anyone interested in seeing our full budget and asking more detailed questions about our proposed bylaw revisions. We do need a quorum of members to vote on our budget, on some proposed bylaw changes, and on renewing the terms of 2 of our board members, as well as 2 members of the nominating committee. So, we hope you'll be able to join us on December 8 at 2 p.m. Also, next week during this service, we'll be welcoming our newest members who have just completed the new member class. We hope you'll be able to join us welcoming them. And finally, if you're here in person today, we'll hope that you'll stick around for a little while after the service ends for coffee and conversation downstairs in Acker Bosworth Hall. Now, let's take a moment to affirm our community's covenant. You can find this on the little purple laminated cards in the pews, or you can just listen line by line and repeat it after I say it. Love is the spirit of this meeting house. This is our great covenant. To dwell together in peace. To seek the truth in love. And to help one another. Thank you. And now, as we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, I invite those of you watching online to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected, even as we are apart. And I invite Lauren to light our chalice for us as Liz reads these words by Nancy Wood.
Good morning. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe in, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from there. Hold on to life, even when it is easier to letting go. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you.
And now, I invite you to join me in singing our opening hymn, which is number 318, 318 in the large gray hymnal, We Would Be One. You'll recognize the tune as Finlandia. Again, that's number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One. Thank you. Receive it. By the way, you sound really good. I invite you now into a time of meditation and prayer. During this time, or at any time during the service, you're welcome to light a silent candle at the table to the right of the pulpit, where there's a journal to record your thoughts and prayers. After our prayer, we'll sing together Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, which is also printed on those purple laminated cards in your pews. We'll sing first in English and then in Spanish. This morning's prayer is by Jess Reynolds from their book, Love Like Thunder. It's called A Prayer for My Queer and Trans Siblings. Here you are, here in this holy space, standing on this ground that is holy because you are here. Here you are in flesh and bone, filling up this body that belongs to you alone. Your pumping heart is a wonder because it keeps you alive. Your loving heart is a blessing because it keeps all of us alive. The spirit of love is a home in you. And may we all see that love in you and let our hearts become mirrors for the compassion at your core. The spirit of justice has a home in you. May we light our wicks from one another until we are all aflame, until we burn out every prejudice we carry in these bodies and bones. Here you are, holy as you are. Blessed be.
From The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. "What is real?" asked the Velveteen Rabbit one day when he and the toy skin horse were lying side by side in their nursery. "Real isn't how you're made," said the skin horse. "It's a thing that happens to you when someone really loves you for a long, long time. Not just to play with you, but really loves you. Then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he is always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, he asked, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or have to be carefully kept. Once you are real, you can't become unreal again.
Thank you, Lee. So it's time to sing our second hymn together, and this is from the Teal book, number 1012, 1012. It's called When I'm Frightened. Ready? Thank you. Our second reading today is by Anne Schrantz. It's called Time to Choose Another Game. Pardon. Winters were cold in Waukesha, Wisconsin, yet for most of my grade school years in the early to mid 60s, girls had to wear skirts or dresses, during school hours. In a nod to practicality, however, we were allowed to wear long pants underneath our skirts while outdoors. This meant putting long pants on at home for the walk to school, then taking them off at school, putting them on again for the walk home for lunch, take them off upon returning to school after lunch, and then putting on the long pants again for the walk home after school. Finally, at home at last, it was the skirt that came off and the pants that stayed on. This clear example of socialization into traditional gender roles did not benefit girls. The pressure was stepped up in middle school. In 7th grade, boys were assigned to take shop and girls were assigned to take home economics. One day in home ec, each girl was given a handful of clip-style wooden clothespins. We were told to monitor each other's knees throughout the day in whatever classes we happened to have together. If any of us sat with our knees apart in any class, we were to give the unladylike offender a clothespin to clip to her hem. She was supposed to go through the rest of the day with the clothespin clipped to her hem as a badge of shame. At the age when peer pressure was strongest, we were recruited to enforce traditional gender roles. The days of enforcing ladylike behavior standards were still in the middle school future, however, when I learned a valuable skill. I learned to play dodgeball. Given the wardrobe changes needed for venturing into the great outdoors in the cold and snow, recess was held indoors in the gym. Dodgeball is a game in which players either try to hit other players with the balls or try to avoid being hit. The way we played dodgeball was one team formed a circle and threw large rubber balls at members of the other team who milled around the center of the circle. My strategy allowed me to become one of the best players in my class. Most players in the middle of the circle scrambled frantically and clustered near each other. I stayed a short distance away from the agitated mass and moved slowly, not drawing attention to myself. Gliding calmly instead of jumping around most always resulted in my being among the last few surviving players inside the circle. I became very good at dodgeball defense. I became very good at defense outside the gym as well. The trouble is that defense is not everything, not even in dodgeball. And dodgeball is not the only game in town. When the game is not the prerogative of the gym teacher, what shall we do with our precious time and energy? But when being emotionally guarded is no longer necessary, letting down one's guard can be tough. So ends the reading. Now is the time in our service when we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection by our choir, we welcome your donations here in the sanctuary and online through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website, uumh.org, and there are QR code cards in the pews as well. I invite 3 volunteer ushers to come forward for the collection. On and off site, your offerings will now be gratefully received. Question is, am I up?
Can you imagine that little person helping me up the steps? I'm reminded the reading at the lighting of the candle was I first heard it in July of 1992, the morning I first came to the Meetinghouse. And 4 months later, those words were the closing remarks at my father's funeral mass in Danvers, Massachusetts. And the song we just sang was one that I soloed in the Unitarian Church in Gloucester, Massachusetts, on World AIDS Day in 1992, carried right here from the Meetinghouse. Okay, that wasn't part of my beginning. Reverend Kate, wherever you are, Mary and Shah, my cheerleaders. Good morning, everyone. I thank the worship committee for inviting me to share some of the chapters of the story of how I came to be here at the Meetinghouse this morning. I'm reminded of a wonderful woman about 6 months ago who attended the Saturday morning Al-Anon meeting here in Provincetown. And she began by saying, "Thank you all for having this meeting. It once again provides me an opportunity to practice who I am." Off script, that also reminds me of Kenny Lonergan, our bell ringer emeritus, younger than me, who passed just this past week. Kenny would often open his sharings at AA meetings by saying, "So I went to the little room in Marblehead for my first meeting. And I said, 'What am I here for?' He said, and the lady said to me, 'Kenny, you're here to find out who you really are.'" This Meetinghouse has been my principal worship committee since July of 1992. And Shah was here, Kathleen was here, Bill was here, other people were here, so it has been a continuously wonderful place for me. I have a cup of coffee which has the legend on it, "Don't be ashamed of your story. It will inspire others." Well, sorry, I can't promise any inspiration, but I'll try to be present as well as I can. Much of my story is a story of shame. At 82, I'm a single person. I'm still ashamed that I'm not a heterosexual husband, father, and grandfather. My precious mother was one of 10 children of Polish immigrants who carried with them across the Atlantic several centuries of Slavic pessimism and political oppression. My good father, whose mother died during the birth of her first child, carried 1,000 years of Irish melancholy. Both parents and their families suffered the trauma of the Great Depression and that of World War II. These factors contributed to my living in a house with 7 separate emotional refrigerators. The doors were all locked, separate keys. I didn't know who liked chocolate ice cream, egg salad, bologna, or what's in tomorrow's hash. We never knew each other. The Catholic influence. I am greatly influenced by Irish and Polish Catholicism. Harsh, scolding, totally male-dominated, and abusing sexuality as a relentless control mechanism. And please, I do not preach or carry any judgment or condemnation of the church or of any other person, place, or institution. For years I have wished that I did not feel the way that I do, but I feel that way. And I've done everything that I can to extricate my terror of human sexuality that was embedded in my DNA. I identify with John Bradshaw, the well-known author who 30 years ago published his first edition of Healing the Shame That Binds You. Before he died 15 years ago, he had published a second edition. He pointed out Catholicism as a major factor in the baggage of shame that he covered for the first half of his life. I identify with John Bradshaw and have read him a couple of times, and it helps. But again, I do not make judgments or condemnations of anybody. It's my journey and it's my healing when I can get to it. When I was young, same-sex affection and erotic attraction were culturally despised. And throughout all 48 states, any same-sex activity was punishable by imprisonment as criminal offenses and so-called treatment by the psychiatric industry. I was nearly 50 years old before I came to begin my struggle to accept my reality that my sexual orientation was principally gay. It was torture for me. I still shudder to recall the terrible isolation of that journey. I never chose to be gay, and the word preference is a lie for me. From grades 1 through 8, I attended the finest public schools in the country in Danvers, Massachusetts. Most of my teachers were women, and they were highly trained in a 3-year program at Salem Normal School, which is now the university. They were the best of the best of the best. They taught us all kinds of things that I wish that this shouldn't be political, that the Congress and some administrative officers of our country should know. Just go back to Tapley School, please. However, the relentless social message of the time was that all normal, healthy people are straight, and anything other was to be destroyed or at the very least kept hidden. The words gay and homophobia were undefined and rarely used. Heterosexism was neither known nor spoken, while it festered under, in my view, the universal social constructs. It existed silently, but was never called by name. On to Boston College and the Boston College Law School. Shame kept me from attending a single football game at Boston College in my 4 years of undergraduate. I do not know a single classmate from my undergraduate years. I was depressed and hidden and couldn't wait to run back to Danvers at night to work in the restaurants that gave me a place to hide from myself. By the time I entered law school, I attended Catholic Mass almost daily, said the rosary, and pleaded with Jesus to turn me into a man. The contemporary psychiatric industry promised that although I was mentally ill, I could be cured of my maturational arrest, it was called, just a kind of a stopping point in my growth. Tragically, I and millions of other men my age believed that message. There was no gay-straight alliance. There was no parade in Boston, no other pride event, and the rainbow flag that seems to find welcome in Provincetown had not yet been invented. At the end of law school, my classmates went on to their jobs, their families, to start a family. I matriculated to a locked ward in a psychiatric hospital, to undergo psychiatric treatment for my mental illness. In truth, I now know that I was misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression. Those were the famous psychiatrist buzzwords of those give it to anybody and feed them pills. I now know that I suffered from acute catastrophic isolation and aloneness, resulting from the shame of growing up gay in a straight world. And I had never, ever, ever shared my feelings in all of the 23 years prior to the locked ward with another human being. After getting out of the hospital, because of the love and affirmation of hundreds of classmates, friends, neighbors, lawyers, judges, clients who never knew what was going on inside, for whatever reason, I was able to accept their love and affirmation and develop into a practicing lawyer. In July of 2001, the governor put me on the Massachusetts Appeals Court as a judge, where I served for 11 phenomenally interesting, wonderful years. I still recall in that hospital waking up the first morning and there was a psychotic University of Massachusetts student in the bed next to me. Terrified me. Then the most beautiful, wonderful nurse, I'm sure she was Irish, started putting a hypodermic needle into my arm. I said, "What is that?" "It's just a little medicine so you won't bite your tongue off when you have your shock treatment." Whoa. At that instant, a 20-year tsunami of shame swept over me, and I was at the lowest point in my life. I feared I would never see my family again, would be locked up in the Danvers State Hospital that was only 8 miles from our home in Danvers, that I would be put in a locked ward with drugs, or, even worse, perhaps have a lobotomy or chemical castration, very favorable treatments in those days. As my only hope, I believed the psychiatrist, work with them, cooperate, and pay the bill on a weekly basis. There was no insurance in those days for psychiatric treatment. One of my doctors continually said to me, "Just do what we say. It's going to click. The sky's the limit." He's also the doctor that told me to supplement my psych drugs with chocolate, and I put on 80 pounds in 1 year. Indeed, becoming a judge was not among my wildest dreams. British mathematician Alan Turing, an undeniable genius, created a primitive computing device which essentially solved the Second World War. A couple of years later, Turing, a gay man, was caught and convicted of gross indecency. That was in March of 1952 when I was 10. Instead of prison, he was sentenced to chemical castration and injected with estrogen for a couple of years, which bloated him up and turned him into a monster. It set this fellow on a slow, sad descent into grief and madness. And as a consequence, in 1984, when I was 12, he committed suicide, reportedly by biting into an apple that he had dipped in cyanide. When I was 51, the United States Supreme Court struck down all laws in the United States prohibiting gay sex among gay persons. Historians noted at that time, wow. Discrimination against homosexual men and women became widespread in the 20th century and reached its peak in the 1930s and the 1960s. Gay men and women were labeled deviants, degenerates, and sex criminals by the psychiatric industry, government officials, and mass media. The federal government banned the employment of homosexuals and insisted that its private contractors ferret out and discharge any gay people, period. Many state governments prohibited gay people from being served in bars and restaurants, and many municipalities launched campaigns to suppress gay life. Footnote. Still as a lawyer, some 35 years ago, two men came to me for criminal defense. One of the men had been arrested in Andover or North Andover as part of a gay sting. The police selected the most attractive of the members of their department and sent him into a place where gay men gathered in late afternoons. And all of the men were arrested and brought to court. One of the men came with his partner to my office. He said, "I wasn't doing anything. I just went in there because I had to urinate." I said, "Oh, I understand." I looked into it and found out that one of those men went home to his house, his family in Essex, Massachusetts that night and committed suicide. I wrote to Jim Shannon, who was then the Attorney General, and I said, "This has to stop." Shannon immediately replied. He said, "I have a gay cousin. We have to do something. You have to form a committee. We're doing everything we can. We have a liaison to the police. Nothing can stop them." That's what it was about 30 years ago. My client had to admit that he was wrong, promised to stay away from places, and his case was continued. That happened to the rest of the people that hadn't killed themselves. But that's how it was at that time. So I never wanted to be a judge. Why would I want something so absurd, something beyond imagination? During my confirmation process in 2001, I was prepared for harsh treatment. It didn't happen. I had represented Mayor Thomas Menino in the state Supreme Court in the case that was predecessor to the Massachusetts gay marriage case. Many may remember that. I think it was now 21 years ago. That case included the language written by Chief Justice Margaret Marshall. The Massachusetts Constitution affirms the dignity and equality of all individuals. It forbids the creation of second-class citizens. May I paraphrase from a book, The Velvet Rage, written by psychologist Alan Downs. The truth is that I grew up disabled, not disabled by my homosexuality, but emotionally disabled in an environment that taught me that I was acceptable, not a real man, and therefore shameful. There has been a lot of change. When I was elected to be the Danvers Town moderator several years ago, a board member noted with a smile of his own, "The town of Danvers has elected an openly gay moderator. Things change." The courts in Massachusetts have been leaders in protecting lesbian and gay people, according us full legal dignity as human beings. Recognition and protection of trans people is coming along, but slowly. I still struggle daily with remnants of the shame camouflage that wrapped me for the first 40 years of my life. I never knew that I knew another gay or lesbian person, not a single one. That brings me to the semi-final chapters of my story this morning. The first is the welcome that I received to this meeting house in 1992. I had come to Provincetown for the first time. I was invited down by some friends who met me at the boat, gay men, who brought me to their dining room, gay dining room, and we had steak and corn on the cob And I couldn't believe it. Well, I knew I could cook, but I didn't know gay men could cook. That night, I'm wandering up Commercial Street, not knowing who I was, why I was, what I was doing here, but I knew I needed to buy something like a silk or rayon shirt that would have flowers on it. I eventually went to Kmart and got one, and I wore it once and then gave it away, or threw it away. I'm up by Spiritus, and I hear, "David, is that you?" Alan Gallant. We had been in Boy Scouts 40 years earlier. Alan said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "What are you doing here?" So we spent a few minutes sharing our stories. Then we hugged and we wept. Alan said, "What are you doing tomorrow morning?" I said, "I don't know what I'm doing tonight or the rest of my life." "What do you mean tomorrow morning?" He said, "I'm the chairman of the UU." I said, "What's a UU?" Just down the street. It's like a church. So the next morning, because Alan invited and asked me to come here, I came in. Wow. There were a dozen or more beach balls, big beach balls, being bounced around. I don't know how they kept away from that chandelier. And I said, wow, isn't this an interesting and wonderful place? Well, every Sunday that I've been in Provincetown since July of 1992, it has been an interesting and wonderful place. That was my welcome here. Now I need to tell you about beach parties and Ozzie and Harriet, if you don't mind. Some 8 years ago, I was invited to join a water aerobics class. My walking is not too great. Stairs are even worse. But I made a commitment to keep my body moving. Well, I used to make fun of the women coming out of the class. And Jan said to me one morning, "If you open your trap one more time, you are going to get pasted in the mouth. Either show up Monday or shut up. It's water aerobics and we will allow a man." Because someone invited me, you call that an invitation, I went, and except when I've been hospitalized, I have been every weekday that I'm not in Provincetown for the last 8 years. The teachers select music as we're jiggling around in there. All the songs are from the 60s and the 70s, age appropriate for us because we're all between 70 and 90. There is one song that I've heard over and over again for 8 years, but it wasn't until 6 months ago that I started hearing the words. And then a couple months ago, I was invited to preach here this morning. So, if you don't mind, this is called The Game of Love, and it peaked as #1 in the 1965 Billboard Hot 100. And as I say, it was several years before I paid attention to these lyrics. Mary?
Okay. Here it comes. Well.
Love a woman, and the purpose of a woman is to love a man.
Come on, baby, let's start today. Come on, baby, let's play.
The game of love, 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 love.
It started long ago in the garden of
Takes us right back 82 years. Adam and Eve, Mummy and Dad, Ozzie and Harriet, Ray Rogers, Dale Evans, Jackie Gleason, I forget his wife, Art Carney, I think it was Audrey. Thousands of radio and television, songs, movies. It's about boy and boy, never It's about boy and girl, girl and boy, boy and girl and boy, over and over and over again. I don't know if anyone else can relate. I can relate because I'm still figuring out or trying to figure out why I'm single at 82. So I have some years left. I looked up the word heterosexism, and here's what I found. Heterosexism is a term that refers to the belief or assumption that homosexuality is the only valid or superior sexual orientation, and that all individuals should be heterosexual. It involves societal norms, attitudes, and practices that marginalize, discriminate against, or invalidate non-sexual orientations. It is one of the most daunting stressors that gay and bisexual youth face. These were writings that began in the 1990s, so they're not like contemporary writings, but the concept is becoming more aware. The final chapter of my story involved the question, is Jesus gay? I'm going to skip it for now. I have written some things about it. I've had some thoughts. The question arises from my own concern about the reality of heterosexism, but also from many, many classical portraits in history of Jesus holding the head of John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And I said to myself, well, so what if Jesus is gay? What if Jesus is straight? What if Jesus is bi? What if Jesus doesn't really care about sex and couldn't care less? So I asked the question because I believe that the reaction that I have heard from friends when I've said, what about this question? Gasp! What's the gasp about? How can you say, let alone think any such question? I said, well, probably because I'm trying to put a sermon together on heterosexism for my community in Provincetown, and that maybe there is some evidence that the concept exists. Thanks very much. I mentioned Kenny Lonergan. I just would like to mention, in saying thank you, that I was a lawyer. I've been a lawyer 56 years. I was a judge for 11 years, and the next 4 years are going to be absolute torture for judges in this nation attempting to hold our democracy together. So, for the next 4 years, quit the judge jokes. Thank you.
He landed safely. Thank you, David. Thank you. Now I invite all of us to join in singing our closing hymn. It's number 1007, 1007 in the Teal book. It's called There's a River Flowing in My Mind. Excuse me, in my soul. I'll find it. A river flowing in my soul, number 1007. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you online. I'd like to thank Lauren and Liz and Lee for their assistance today. And you may or may not know, but it has become our practice to pose a question based on the theme of the service each week. It can be a topic of sharing today at coffee hour or with friends during the week. And if you'd like to delve deeper into this question, we invite you to join us on our Zoom coffee hour Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Please contact Kenneth in the office if you need that link. Our question this week is, what are your thoughts on the concept of heterosexism? What are your thoughts on the concept of heterosexism? You probably could guess what David really wanted it to be. So, fine then. I will end with these closing words. The spirit of justice has a home in you. May we light our wicks from one another until we are all aflame, until we burn out every prejudice that we carry in these bones. Here you are, holy as you are. We love you. Go in peace.